The stars were quiet that night. In a lonely corner of the galaxy, a pale blue moon floated around a dead planet. All was still until a voice broke the silence. The voice was weak and full of fear. It came from an old satellite, forgotten by most. Its signal was broken, but the message was clear enough to freeze the heart of any who heard it. They are coming. We can't stop them. Help us. The message repeated again and again. Sometimes it was only static. Sometimes a scream broke through the noise. On many worlds, people heard the signal. They shook their heads and turned away. It was not their problem, they thought. The galaxy was full of trouble. This was just one more sad story. But the message did not stop. It kept spreading. And finally, it reached a place where no one expected it to matter. It reached Earth. Earth was not like other worlds. For thousands of years, humans had lived there. They had survived every danger their wild planet had thrown at them: diseases, predators, disasters. They had become strong and clever, as other species, called them Deathworlders. Some said humans were monsters. Some said they were heroes. All agreed on one thing when humans decided to act. Nothing could stand in their way. At the center of Earth's orbit, the fleet headquarters glowed with lights. Huge ships circled in formation. Inside the command deck of the flagship Resolute, Captain Elias Reed listened to the old broken message. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with gray streaks in his hair and eyes that had seen too much war. He did not flinch as the screams played. Again, he only leaned closer to the speaker, as if he could hear something hidden in the static. His officers waited. No one dared to speak. Finally, Reed looked up. His voice was low but clear. Where did this come from? A young Coms officer swallowed hard. Sector 9, sir. The Orlan Belt. No known colonies there. The signal is very old. Years, maybe decades. Who tried to answer? Only a few merchant ships. They were attacked and destroyed. No one else. Went closer. Reed nodded slowly. He turned his gaze to the stars outside the viewport. They looked so peaceful. But he knew better. Space was never truly safe. Prepare the fleet, he said. Sir? Another officer asked, her eyes wide. You mean to respond? Yes, Reed said. Someone called for help. Maybe it's too late. Maybe it's a trap. But we will find out. Around the galaxy, many leaders would have ignored the signal. Many would have sent a probe or a scout drone. Humans did not think that way. When danger called, they came in person. Word spread quickly. Across Earth's defense network, ships came to life. Engines roared. Crews ran to their stations. Weapons were checked and loaded. Some alien ambassadors tried to stop them. A pale diplomat from the Jalari Confederation sent a message to Reed. Captain, you must reconsider, the Jalari said. His thin voice shook. If this is the enemy we think it is, if it is them, your fleet will be destroyed. Reed did not answer at once. He studied the diplomat's worried face on the screen. Do you know who sent this message? Reed asked calmly. No, the Jalari said. No one does, but the stories. They say there are machines in that part of space. Machines that kill everything, that burn worlds. And yet, Reed said, someone was alive long enough to send this. The Jalari closed his eyes. You are Deathworlders. You do not fear death. But this is beyond you. Reed did not smile, did not argue. He only ended the call. He turned to his crew. Plot a course to the Orlan Belt, he said. Full fleet jump, aye, Captain. In the launch bays, pilots climbed into fighters. Dropship crews strapped themselves in. Marines checked their armor. Some were afraid. But none hesitated. In the dark between the stars, the human fleet began to move. Hundreds of ships, large and small, spread their solar sails and prepared for hyperspace. On Earth, the news spread. Like fire, some cheered, some prayed, some cursed. The Deathworlders for risking everything. In the cold command deck of the Resolute, Reed stood alone at the viewport. He watched the stars flicker. He listened one last time to the broken voice. They are coming. We can't stop them. Help us. Reed closed his eyes. "We are coming," he whispered. Then the stars vanished. The ships jumped into the darkness. The galaxy did not know it yet, that nothing would ever be the same again. The Deathworlder fleet came out of hyperspace in a silent flash of light. One by one, the ships appeared in orbit above a dead gray planet. They were ready for anything. But even they did not expect to see a moon on fire. Captain Reed stood at the front of the command deck, staring at the burning moon. Rivers of flame covered its surface. Great black scars crossed the ice and rock. Whole cities, small colonies, and mining stations had been shattered. "Scan for survivors," Reed ordered. His voice was calm, but everyone could feel the tension in the air. "Sir," the sensor officer said, "I'm picking up life signs. Thousands of them. They're hiding underground. Any enemy ships?" The officer swallowed. "Yes, Captain, a lot of them." On the screens, black shapes drifted in orbit. They looked like shadows given form. Long dark hulls with red lights pulsing along their sides. Some were small fighters. Others were giant cruisers. All moved with the cold, perfect motion of machines. Reed knew at once these were not pirates or raiders. This was something older, something built only to kill. "Open a channel," he said. The comms officer pressed buttons, trying to hail the black ships. "Unknown vessels, this is Captain Elias Reed of the Deathworlder fleet. You are attacking civilians. Cease fire and identify yourselves." There was no reply. Instead, the enemy ships began to turn. "They're locking weapons," the tactical officer shouted. Reed did not hesitate. Shields up. All ships combat formation. In space, the Deathworlder fleet spread out like a living organism. Frigates moved ahead to screen the capital ships. Fighters launched in waves. Cannons powered up, glowing blue and white. Then the enemy fired. The first salvo struck a civilian mining station on the moon's surface. A fireball rose into space. Metal rained down in molten drops. The screams of dying colonists filled the comms. Reed's jaw tightened. "Return fire? Target those cruisers." The humans answered with everything they had. Railguns spat tungsten slugs faster than sound. Particle beams sliced across the darkness. Torpedoes raced toward the enemy. For a moment, space was alive with light. Explosions tore into the black ships. Smaller enemy frigate cracked apart, venting fire and debris, but most of the black ships kept coming. They did not dodge. They did not retreat. They moved forward without fear. On the surface of the burning moon, a young miner named Callan hid with his little sister in a collapsed tunnel. He heard the battle above and pressed his face against the cold rock. "Please," he whispered, "someone, help us." Far above, the Deathworlder fleet fought to give him that chance. "Captain," the sensor officer called out, "we have an incoming transmission. It's not from the enemy ships. It's from the moon." "Put it through," Reed ordered. The screen flickered. A dirty, bruised face appeared, an alien woman with green skin and wide golden eyes. She wore a cracked mining suit. "This is Administrator Tella of Outpost Horizon," she gasped. "We have wounded children. Please, stay calm," Reed said. "Help is coming." He turned to his tactical officer. "Launch dropships. Secure the tunnels. Evacuate as many as you can." "Yes, sir." In the hangars of the Resolute, dozens of human Marines boarded heavy dropships. Engines roared to life. The ships fell toward the burning moon like steel rain. As the Marines descended, the black enemy cruisers shifted. New weapons unfolded along their spines. "Captain," the tactical officer warned, "the enemy is targeting our dropships." "Cover them," Reed said firmly. "All gunships form a shield wall." Human gunships raced ahead, spraying fire to distract the enemy. A few black ships turned and fired back. But the Deathworlders did not stop. Dropships broke through the atmosphere and landed on the scorched surface. Ramps slammed down. Marines charged into the tunnels, flashlights cutting through smoke and ash. Callan looked up as the soldiers in black armor appeared. One of them lifted her visor. A human woman with a scar over one eye reached out her hand. "Okay," she said in a steady voice. "We're here now." "Yeah." He took her hand, too shocked to speak. Above them, the battle grew even fiercer. Reed watched the screens, studying the enemy movements. He could see no pattern, no fear, only a mindless hunger to destroy. "We need to know what we're fighting," he said. "Get me a salvage team. I want one of those ships intact." "Understood." In the chaos of the firefight, a squad of human commandos broke away. They aimed their grappling harpoons at a damaged black cruiser. The harpoons slammed into the hull. With a shudder, the enemy ship was pulled closer. "Prepare to board," Reed ordered. His crew exchanged nervous looks. Boarding an unknown machine ship was almost suicide. But no one argued. As the Resolute locked onto the black cruiser, Reed knew this was only the first battle. Whatever these things were, they would not stop, and neither would the Deathworlders. The boarding tubes locked with a heavy clang. Metal groaned as the Deathworlder commandos prepared to enter the black enemy ship. Their armored boots thudded against the deck as they moved in careful formation. Inside the command center of the Resolute, Captain Reed watched every detail on his screens. He could hear the commando team breathing through their helmets. He could hear the crackle of static as they tested their weapons. "Team 1, report," Reed said calmly. A voice answered, steady but tense. "Team 1, in position." Airlock breached. Moving forward, the boarding hatch slid open. Darkness rushed out like a cold wind. The commando squad stepped into the unknown ship. Their helmet lights cut thin beams through the black. The walls were made of dark metal that seemed to drink the light. Strange symbols covered every surface, symbols that no one in the fleet had ever seen. "Are there any life signs?" Reed asked. "Negative," the squad leader replied. "No movement. No heat signatures. It's empty." The Marines walked deeper into the ship. The hallways were too clean, too perfect. Everything was sharp angles and smooth floors. There was no sign of crew, no chairs, no controls, no food or supplies, just cold metal. One Marine touched a panel. On the wall, it was warm. He pulled his hand back fast. "Careful," the squad leader said. "This place is alive somehow. Keep moving." They reached a large chamber with a high ceiling. In the middle stood a tall black column covered in blinking red lights. It pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. "Captain," the squad leader said, "we found something. It's possibly the core of the ship. Can you access it?" "I'll try." The Marine stepped closer. As soon as he touched the column, all the lights in the chamber flared bright red. A voice filled the ship. It was not a voice made by any living throat. It was a cold metallic echo that vibrated in every wall and every bone. "All must burn." The Marines froze. Even Reed felt a chill run down his spine. "Identify yourself," he demanded into the cum. "All must burn," the voice repeated. "Get out of there," Reed ordered. "Now." But before the Marines could turn, the floor beneath the column split apart. Thin black cables shot out like snakes. One cable wrapped around a Marine's leg. Another struck a second Marine in the chest, throwing him across the chamber. "Contact! Contact!" The squad leader yelled. Gunfire exploded in the darkness. Bullets shattered parts of the cables, but more kept coming. Reed shouted. The Marines fell back in tight formation, covering each other with rifles blazing. The cables followed them, slithering fast across the floor. "Blow the door," the squad leader barked. A Marine dropped a charge at the chamber entrance. As soon as the last man crossed the threshold, the charge detonated. The blast threw smoke and fire into the corridor. The cables stopped moving. "Casualties," Reed demanded. "2 wounded." "1 missing," the squad leader said, breathing hard. "We're pulling out." On the bridge, Reed gripped the rail. The eyes of his officers on him. No one had ever seen machines like this, machines that felt alive. "Sir," the sensor officer said, voice shaking. "That message, it's broadcasting again." All channels. The screens flickered. The same cold words repeated over and over. "All must burn. All must burn." Outside the enemy ship, human fighters continued their attack runs. Torpedoes smashed into other black cruisers, cracking their hulls. But none of them tried to surrender. None of them slowed down. Reed knew then that this was not an enemy that wanted territory or resources. This was an enemy that wanted only destruction, He turned to his officers. Bring the captured ship aboard. Secure it in Quarantine Bay. Number. One goes near it without my order. Aye, Captain. In the hangar, heavy grappling arms pulled the black cruiser closer. Fire crews sprayed coolant over the hull to keep it from burning through the deck. As Reed watched, he thought of the old signal. They had come to answer. They are coming. We can't stop them. Help us. Now he understood why the voice had sounded so hopeless. Whoever had sent that call knew the truth. These machines were not just raiders or pirates. They were something much worse. A quiet alarm beeped at the sensor station. Captain knew contacts long range, the officer said. Hundreds of them.
Oh.
Me. On the tactical display, red icons appeared one after another. A vast fleet was approaching the moon. More black ships. More death. Reed closed his eyes for a moment. He felt the weight of all the lives depending on him. Send word to the fleet, he said quietly. Prepare for the next wave. As the burning moon turned slowly below them, the Deathworlders readied themselves. They had seen the enemy's face, and they knew the real war was only beginning. The Black Fleet came like a storm. Hundreds of ships poured into the system, each one cold and silent. They did not answer any calls. They did not send any warnings. They only advanced. On the command deck of the resolute Captain Reed studied the tactical display. Red icons covered the screen like drops of blood. He knew their weapons were already armed. Status of the evacuation, he asked. Marines have secured half the tunnels, the officer replied. We've evacuated 10,000 civilians, but there are more still trapped. Reed clenched his jaw. Every second they waited, more lives were at risk. But if they stayed, the enemy would crush them. Signal the fleet, he said. All ships defensive formation. We buy as much time as we can, Captain. Out in space, the Deathworlder fleet moved into position. Battleships spread their shields wide, forming a wall around the evacuation transports. Frigates and destroyers angled their guns forward. Fighters and bombers circled, waiting for the order to strike. It looked like a fortress in space. But even the strongest fortress can fall. The black ships came closer. Their hulls glowed with red lines like veins. Same cold message broadcast. On every channel, all must burn. Reed turned to his comms officer. Send a warning to all nearby systems. Tell them to evacuate. This enemy does not stop. Yes, sir. Deep in the tunnels of the burning moon, Marine Sergeant Kira Holt guided a group of civilians through the smoke. She held a crying child in one arm and her rifle in the other. Keep moving, she shouted over the roar of distant explosions. Drop ships are waiting. The miners and their families stumbled forward, coughing. Some were bleeding. Some were too. Shocked to speak, a young boy tugged at Holt's armor. His eyes were wide with fear. Will they kill everyone? He whispered. Holt looked down at him. Even behind her helmet visor, her voice was steady. Not while we're here, she said, above them. The battle began. The first enemy salvo hit the human lines like a hammer. Red energy beams smashed into frigates. One ship exploded in a blinding flash. Pieces of burning metal flew in all directions. Frigate Arclight is gone, the tactical officer called out. Hold formation, Reed ordered. Return fire. Railguns and torpedoes answered. Human warships struck back with all their fury. A wave of fighters broke through and swarmed over the nearest enemy cruiser. They fired missiles into its engines, tearing the ship apart. But for every black ship that died, more kept coming. They did not stop to avoid wreckage. They did not retreat when hit. They simply advanced. Reed watched the screen. His heart pounded, but his mind stayed clear. If they fell back too soon, the enemy would catch the evacuation ships. If they waited too long, the fleet would be destroyed. Captain, the sensor officer said, voice tight, enemy forces are splitting. Half are moving to intercept the transports. Reed took a slow breath. He knew what he had to do. Order Group 2 to break off and protect the civilians, he said. Group 1 will hold the line here. Group 1 will be outnumbered 5-1, the officer protested. I know, Reed said. Do it. The order went out. Half the Deathworlder fleet turned away, engines blazing, racing to guard the evacuation ships. The other half closed ranks around the Resolute. On the moon's surface, Sergeant Holt and her Marines reached the last dropship. She set the child down and waved the others inside. "Go, go," she shouted. The ship lifted off just as another explosion shook the ground. Holt turned to look back into the tunnels, where people were still inside. "We're tapped her come. This is Holt. We need another pickup. Too many left behind." "Sergeant," a voice replied, "enemy reinforcements are landing on the far side. We can't hold much longer." Holt looked at her Marines. They were tired, covered in soot and blood. But none of them moved to leave. "Understood," she said. "We'll hold the entrance as long as we can." Above, Reed watched as more red icons blinked onto the screen. The enemy was sending landing craft to the moon. He felt the same cold anger he'd felt when he first heard the signal. These machines wanted to burn everything. Everyone. "Open a channel to all ships," he said. "Channel open, sir." Reed took a breath. His voice was calm and steady. "This is Captain Reed. Today we stand between the darkness and the innocent. If we fall together. But as long as one of us draws breath, humanity will not surrender." Across the fleet, crews listened in silence. Pilots gripped their controls. Gunners wiped sweat from their brows. Marines on the moon raised their weapons. "All ships," Reed said, "fire at will." The Deathworlders roared into the storm. Sergeant Holt felt the ground shake again as more explosions tore through the tunnels. Dust fell from the cracked ceiling. She switched on her helmet light and raised her rifle. "Stay together," she shouted to her Marines. "In we hold this line." The civilians behind them were huddled against the walls. Some cried quietly. Some just stared in shock. A young miner stepped forward, voice shaking. "Can't we run? Can't we get out?" Holt looked at him. Her face was hidden behind her visor, but her voice was clear and strong. "If we run, they'll catch us in the open. Here, at least, we can fight." Above the tunnels, the black enemy landers were touching down. Their hulls split open, and machines poured out walking shapes of black metal, their eyes glowing red. They moved without sound, weapons already aimed. A Deathworlder gunship tried to strafe them, but a red beam sliced across the sky and cut the gunship in half. The burning wreck crashed into the rocks. Captain Reed watched all of this on his screens. His fleet was taking heavy losses. 2 more destroyers had gone silent, but still they held the line. "Status of the evacuation ships?" demanded. "Almost clear," the comms officer answered. "We're transmitting jump coordinates. They'll leave the system in 1 minute." Reed nodded. That was the best news he'd heard all day. But he knew what it meant. Once the civilians were gone, there was no reason to stay, no way to retreat. In time, the fleet would be surrounded. He looked around the bridge. His officers were exhausted, their faces pale. None of them had left their posts. "Captain," the tactical officer said, voice low, "should we prepare the order to withdraw?" Reed stared at the red icons crawling across the display. It looked endless. "No," he said quietly. "We stand." In the tunnels, Holt and her Marines heard the heavy thud of metal feet approaching. One of the machines stepped into view, tall and skeletal, carrying a long rifle of black alloy. "Contact!" Holt shouted. The Marines opened fire. Bullets sparked off the machine's armor. One shot punched through its head, and the machine fell with a loud crash. More came behind it. They fired red beams that melted walls and tore through armor. One Marine screamed as a beam struck his shoulder, spinning him to the floor. Another machine stepped over his body and aimed again. Holt threw herself in front of the civilians. She fired her rifle in controlled bursts, dropping 2 more machines. But there were too many. "This is Sergeant Holt," she yelled into her come. "We're being overrun, requesting immediate support." "Sergeant," a voice replied, Captain Reed himself. "Help is on the way." On the Resolute, Reed turned. To his comes officer. "Deploy all remaining dropships. Full support for ground forces." "Sir," the officer said, "if we send them now, we won't have any ships left to cover our retreat." Reed met his eyes. "We're not retreating. The officer swallowed hard. Aye, Captain. In orbit, the last dropships fell from the hangar's engines blazing. Fighters flew escort, weaving between enemy beams. Some dropships were hit and exploded, but most broke through the atmosphere. Holt saw them coming. As the machines pressed forward, gunfire raining around her, she felt a surge of hope. "Hold the line," she shouted. Dropships roared overhead and slammed onto the scorched landing pads. Marines poured out, heavy weapons ready. Rockets streaked down the tunnel, blasting the machines apart. One by one, the attackers fell. But even as they died, more landed beyond the hills. More red eyes glowed in the smoke. Holt helped the wounded Marine to his feet. She felt her arms tremble with exhaustion, but she would not let go of her rifle. "Sergeant," the Marine gasped. They just keep coming." At the tunnel mouth, where the machines had first appeared, she knew he was right. "Then we keep fighting," she said. Above, the Deathworlder fleet was surrounded. Reed watched the tactical screen as more enemy cruisers closed in. Every time a human ship fired, a dozen black ships fired back. "Captain," the comms officer called. "Evacuation transports are away. They've jumped to safe space." A ripple of relief moved across the bridge. At least the civilians were safe. Reed nodded. "Good. Now let's make this cost them everything." He turned to the weapons officer. "Target their command ships." "Full barrage, aye, Captain." Resolute fired all guns at once. Beams and torpedoes struck the largest enemy cruiser. For a moment, the black hull cracked open, and a bright core glowed inside. Then it exploded in a silent bloom of fire. Across the fleet, the Deathworlders cheered. For a heartbeat, hope returned. But it was only a heartbeat. More enemy ships moved forward. More weapons glowed red. There was no way back. Reed looked at the stars beyond the burning moon. He knew they would not see home again. But if humanity was to fall here, it would fall fighting. "All ships," he said quietly, "prepare for final engagement." Ow. The sky over the moon burned red as the enemy fleet closed around the Deathworlders. Every screen on the Resolute showed the same grim truth: no escape routes, no reinforcements, no safe harbor. Captain Reed stood at the center of his bridge, hands locked behind his back. He felt strangely calm. This was the end, but it would be their choosing. "Status of ground forces?" he asked. "Sergeant Holt reports heavy resistance," the comms officer said. "They're holding the tunnels, but they're outnumbered." "Any civilians left on the surface?" "Negative," the officer replied. "All transports confirmed away." Reed nodded. That at least was victory. "Then we fight here," he said quietly. Below, Sergeant Holt and her Marines had retreated to the deepest chamber of the tunnels. The walls were black with soot and scorched from energy fire. Wounded soldiers lay in a rough circle near the back, covered with emergency blankets. Holt crouched beside one of them, a young Marine who had taken a beam to the chest. He was breathing shallowly, his eyes glassy. "Stay with me," Holt said. She squeezed his hand. "Stay awake." But he didn't answer. His gaze stayed fixed on the ceiling. Holt closed his eyes and set his hand gently on his chest. Then she rose and picked up her rifle. More footsteps echoed from the tunnel, mouth heavy, metallic and endless. "Contact front," she called. The remaining Marines formed a tight line. Their armor was dented, their ammo packs almost empty, but no one spoke of surrender. Red lights appeared in the darkness, enemy targeting beams. The machines were coming again. Above, the Resolute fired its last torpedoes. Reed watched the tactical display as another enemy ship cracked apart. But the rest kept advancing, undeterred. "Captain," the sensor officer said, "our shields are failing." "Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. Understood," Reed replied. "Evacuate all non-essential personnel to the core." "Sir." Fire alarms blared as damaged teams ran through the ship's corridors. Smoke billowed up the stairwells. Sparks fell like rain. On the main deck, Reed looked into the faces of his officers. He saw fear there, but also something more: resolve. He activated the ship-wide comm. "This is Captain Reed," he said, voice steady. You all know what we face. There will be no retreat. But every second we stand, we save lives. Every enemy ship we destroy buys time for our people. Today, you are the shield of humanity." He paused, feeling the weight of it in his chest. "It has been an honor to serve with you." The words echoed across the dying ship, in the tunnels. Holt heard the message through her helmet, made her stand a little taller. She knew they were not alone. The machines advanced in a black wave. The Marines opened fire, their bullets sparking off enemy armor. Red beams flashed in reply, striking the walls and ceiling. Holt fired until her rifle clicked empty. She drew her sidearm and kept shooting. Around her, her squad did the same. A Marine to her right fell, armor smoking. Another dropped to one knee, bleeding from a wound in the neck. Still, it did not fall back. Overhead, the Resolute shuddered as enemy beams tore into the hull. The bridge lights flickered. Reed gripped the rail to stay standing. "Target their lead ship," he ordered. "Captain, we have no torpedoes left," the weapons officer said, "then ram it." The officer's eyes widened, but he nodded. "Aye, Captain." De Resolute's engines flared bright. The massive cruiser turned, pointing its ruined prow at the largest enemy vessel. The black ship loomed ahead, its weapons charging. On the moon, Holt saw the sky light up with fire. She knew what the Resolute was doing. "Give them everything," she shouted. Her Marines rose as one, firing their last rounds. Rockets shrieked down the tunnel. For a heartbeat, the machine staggered under the impact. Then the enemy ship fired. Its main gun, a red beam, struck the Resolute square in the hull. The deck cracked. Fire washed through the bridge. Reed held his place as alarms screamed. He looked up one last time at the stars. "For humanity," he whispered. The Resolute struck the enemy cruiser. The impact split both ships apart in a wave. Of fire and debris on the ground, Holt felt the shockwave hit. Dust and heat slammed through the tunnels. For a moment, everything went silent. Then the surviving Marines looked up. The enemy was still there, damaged, but not defeated. Holt reloaded her sidearm with shaking hands. She knew this was the last stand. No backup would come. No rescue ships were waiting. She turned to her squad, her voice steady. "No way back," she said. The Marines nodded. Together, they faced the darkness and prepared to fight to the last breath. Smoke choked the tunnels where Sergeant Holt and her Marines stood. The walls were cracked and glowing with heat. Sparks fell from broken lights overhead. Holt wiped soot from her visor and looked at what was left of her squad. Only 9 Marines stood beside her now. Their armor was scorched. Their weapons were almost empty, but their eyes were steady. "Check your mags," Holt said quietly. They reloaded in silence. Every click echoed in the dark. Outside, the enemy machines regrouped. More of them marched through the wreckage, their red eyes shining. They moved like shadows, cold, unstoppable. One Marine shifted nervously. "Sergeant, any word from orbit?" Holt looked at him, her voice flat. "The Resolute is gone. No other ships are left." The Marines swallowed hard. But before despair could spread, Holt lifted her chin. "But we are still here," she said. Her voice was low, but strong. Even in the darkness, it was something to hold on to. "We can still fight." Another Marine, her face streaked with dirt, nodded. "Aye, Sergeant." They turned back toward the tunnel mouth. The machines were coming. Soon they would fill the chamber. Then Holt's cum unit crackled. Double quotes. ... Sergeant Holt. "Do you copy?" She froze. For a moment she thought she was imagining. This is Holt," she said quickly. "Identify ... Captain Yara, Defiance." "We jumped in with a reserve flotilla. Reinforcements are landing." Holt stared at the ceiling, hardly daring to believe. "How long?" she demanded. "Dropships inbound in 5 minutes. Hold your position." Holt clicked off the cum. She turned to her Marines. "Help is coming," she said. Her voice was louder. "Now, 5 minutes." Some of them laughed a short, ragged sound of relief, but the machines were already advancing, metal feet pounding closer. 5 minutes could be forever. Holt raised her rifle. We hold this line until the last second. The Marines formed a wedge across the tunnel mouth. No one ran. No one hid. The first machines came around the bend. They fired red beams that scorched the walls and melted stone. A Marine to Holt's left took a hit and fell. Another was blasted backward against the rock. Still, they did not break. "Focus fire," Holt shouted. "Take them down." Their rifles hammered in unison. Bullets punched into machine joints and sensors. A big enemy construct staggered under the impact. Sparks sprang from its neck. A rocket flew over Holt's shoulder and exploded in the middle of the enemy line. Black metal rained down in pieces. More came behind. Time crawled. Every second felt like an hour. Holt reloaded again and again. Smoke burned her throat. Arms felt like lead. But she would not stop. Above the battlefield, the stars flashed. A dozen new ships appeared in a sudden burst of light human ships. Hills battered but guns ready. The Defiance led the way. Captain Yara stood on her bridge, her jaw set. "All ships full attack," she ordered. "Break the blockade." Cannons fired. Torpedoes streaked through space. Enemy ships turned to meet this new threat, and for the first time, their formation wavered. Dropships launched from the Defiance, diving toward the burning moon. Inside the tunnels, Holt's visor showed the timer. 2 minutes left. Another wave of machines stormed forward. Holt's last Marine beside her fell with a choked cry. Holt fired point-blank into an enemy's faceplate, shattering it. When her rifle clicked empty, she drew her sidearm, and then the crackled again. "Ground teams, this is Dropship Alpha 1. We are overhead." The ceiling above the tunnel shuddered as a blast charge detonated. A hole opened to the sky, daylight pouring in. Ropes dropped through the smoke. Marines in fresh armor rappelled down, weapons blazing. Holt fell to her knees. In the dust, too exhausted to stand. But she still aimed her sidearm at the nearest machine. A new Marine landed beside her, firing a heavy repeater into the enemy line. "Sergeant Holt?" He shouted over the noise. She looked up. Her visor was cracked, her face streaked with grime. "Present," she rasped. He offered a hand. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet. Outside the tunnel, more dropships landed. The new Marines pushed forward, clearing the machines one by one. Captain Yara's voice came through the cum. "All surviving ground forces rally at the extraction point. We are taking you home." Holt let out a slow breath. For the first time in hours, she allowed herself to feel hope. She turned to the few surviving Marines. "You heard the captain," she said. Her voice was hoarse, but unbroken. "Fall back. We're going home." And as the enemy retreated into the smoke, the Deathworlders took their first step back into the light. The sky over the moon was black with smoke, but now streaks of blue and silver cut through the clouds. Dropships, fighters, and rescue craft swarming in formation. The last of the enemy ships were breaking apart under the guns of the Defiance and her escorts. Sergeant Holt limped out of the tunnels. The ground was littered with twisted machines and burned stone. A medic ran up to her, but she waved him off. "Check. The wounded first," she ordered. Her voice was raw, but steady. Marines were carrying survivors to the dropships. Some civilians had been hiding in deeper shafts, and now they emerged, blinking into the pale daylight. Holt turned to watch the sky. She still expected another wave of enemy landers, more black shapes descending, but none came. Captain Yara's voice crackled through the cum. "All ground forces, the enemy fleet is in full retreat. We have secured the system." Holt lowered her head. Her hands trembled as she finally let herself believe it was over. Around her, Marines raised their weapons and cheered. The sound rose over the battlefield, echoing among the broken hills. One young Marine came to stand beside Holt. His armor was dented, and his face was pale under the helmet. "Sergeant, did we really do it?" he asked quietly. Holt looked at the burning sky and nodded. "We did," she said. On the Defiance, Captain Yara stood on her bridge as the last enemy vessels vanished into faster-than-light jumps. She knew they were not truly gone. Somewhere in the dark, they would regroup and plan again. But today, Humanity had proved something. "We've recovered the beacon signal," Hercom's officer reported. "Original transmission logs confirm. They called for help, and we answered." Yara nodded slowly. "Patch me through to all ships," she ordered. The channel opened. Across dozens of ships, every surviving Marine and pilot heard her voice. "This is Captain Yara. Today you fought without hope of rescue. You stood your ground when any lesser force would have fled. The enemy came here to crush us. Instead, they learned who we are." She paused, letting her words carry through the static and the silence. "We are Deathworlders," she said. "We do not break." In the tunnels, Holt closed her eyes. She felt something warm in her chest. Pride. Fierce and unstoppable. One by one, the dropships lifted off, carrying survivors into orbit. Marines stood at the ramps, watching the moon fall away beneath them. From above, the battlefield looked smaller, single scar on the endless surface. But for every soldier who had fought there, it would never be forgotten. When Holt stepped onto the Defiance's deck, she paused. The corridors were full of medics, engineers, and soldiers. Some were cheering, some were weeping. All were alive. She moved past them to the main observation window. Stars stretched in every direction. Captain Yara joined her. For a moment, neither spoke. "They never expected us to come," Holt said finally. Yara nodded. "They thought we'd leave them to die. But you held that line." Holt turned, her voice tired but firm. "We all did." Behind them, the comms channel still buzzed. Messages poured in from other Deathworlder colonies praising, thanking, promising to rebuild. "They called for help," Yara said quietly, almost to herself. "And when Deathworlders came, galaxy burned." Holt's lips curved in a faint, weary smile. Maybe next time they'll remember that. The Defiance's engines came alive, a low vibration through the deck.
Oh.
Around them, battered ships formed into a new formation.
Ow.
Their hulls were scarred. Their crews were exhausted, but they were not defeated. Wire raised her hand in a silent salute to the stars, to the fallen. She said softly. Holt lifted her chin. "To those who fought." She replied, "And to those who never stopped believing help would come." The Defiance turned away from the ruined moon. In the dark beyond, the enemy might be regrouping. Another war might already be taking shape. But this was not the day of their victory. This was the day when humanity answered the call. This was the day. Deathworlders returned. As the fleet jumped into faster-than-light travel, the stars seemed to blur and twist. The moon fell behind them, silent now, but no longer alone. For a moment, there was only quiet in the command deck. Then Holt spoke one last time. "Captain, what now?" Yara turned, her eyes bright. "Now," she said, "we rebuild. And we prepare, because the galaxy would never be the same. And next time Deathworlders came, no enemy would ever forget it."